All right, so in this video, we're going to continue with the story of Islam. So in our previous video, we got through the beginning of Islam and saw the initial events of Muhammad founding the religion. In this video, we're going to hit pause on that for just a minute, and we'll come back to the events. But before we go back to that, I'd like to take a few minutes and kind of talk about the core beliefs of Islam, just as we did with Christianity and Buddhism and Judaism. I want to take a few minutes and talk about some of the core beliefs of Islam before we move back to the story. So the core beliefs of Islam are called the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars of Islam. So let's just go through them one by one. So the first one is the Declaration of Faith. And basically the Declaration of Faith says, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. So there is no God but God, and sometimes you might see this replaced with Allah. So there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. So that's basically the low bar of Islam. You have to believe this to go forward. The next one, and all of these also have an Arabic word. I'll give you the Arabic word for them too, just for completeness' sake. So faith is shahada. The second one is prayer. And prayer is salah. Muslims pray 5 times a day. And the idea is that you are supposed to face Mecca. So prayer 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca. In Islamic societies, there will be a call to prayer. So they will tell you when it's time to pray 5 times a day. Generally speaking, it's kind of like first thing in the morning, then lunchtime, then afternoon, then dinner time, then bedtime. Those are the times when you pray. In Islamic societies, you will hear it. They'll tell you when it's time to pray. And in most Islamic societies, if you're inside, there'll be some sort of indicator to tell you which way Mecca is. If you're not in an Islamic society, you just kind of make your best guess. So in the United States, you would generally face east. Here in Florida, pretty much due east is where Mecca would be. The next one is charity, sometimes described as almsgiving. That means you're giving money to the poor. So in Arabic, this is zakat. So this is a reflection of the Arabic environment where this started. So making sure that this is a reflection of hospitality and taking care of those who need help. Again, in Islamic societies, this is sometimes just taken right out of your paycheck. In non-Islamic societies, you have to give money to a charity, but this is something that's expected of Muslims. The fourth one is fasting, and I believe it's pronounced Sum, although I might be mispronouncing that. So for fasting, Muslims fast during the month of Ramadan. And Ramadan is a month on the Islamic calendar. So the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, which means that the months don't correspond exactly with our regular calendar. The Islamic calendar and the calendar that we use for secular events is off by about 2 to 2.5 weeks. So Ramadan moves. So Ramadan moves. It moves through the year. And so what you do is you fast, so no food or water during daylight hours. So no food or water during daylight, which is great during the winter because the days in winter are short. The days in the summer are long. So you have to go longer without food or water during the summer. So typically during Ramadan, during this 4-week period, Muslims will have a really big breakfast and then do their best to kind of take it easy during the rest of the day. And then they'll have a big dinner as soon as the sun goes down. Obviously, it's easier to do when the days are shorter. And at the end of this period, they have a big celebration to celebrate the fact that they fasted for the whole month. The point of this fasting is to teach self-discipline. That's the point of the fasting, is to teach self-discipline to Muslims. And the last one of these core beliefs is pilgrimage, or in Arabic, the Hajj. And this is the idea that all Muslims must try to visit Mecca in their lifetime. And so you go to Mecca during a specific month in the Islamic calendar, and you participate in all manner of religious activities in Mecca. Now, the idea for all of these things is that none of these things are meant to be so difficult for you to do that you can't do them, right? So if you're too poor or sick to go to Mecca, or you're sick, or a little kid God doesn't expect you to fast if it means that that's going to kill you. If you're so poor that you can't manage to go to Mecca, it's not that you have to go. These are things that you should try to do. God isn't going to be mad if you are financially unable to or medically unable to fast. But the idea is that these are goals. These are things that you should try to do. And especially if you're poor, the charity is meant for you. If you can help out someone else, you should. But if you need to receive help, that's the point of this. And a lot of these ideas aren't all that different from the Judeo-Christian tradition that Islam comes from, right? Everybody is okay with prayer. Everyone is okay with helping people. Everyone is okay with a statement of faith in action. I mean, for Christians or Jews, this might be a sign of asceticism, right? The idea that giving something up is a sign of your faith. And pilgrimage is something that Christians often did well before Islam started, going to see holy relics in churches. So all of these ideas are reflected in one way, shape, or form in other religions. This is just the 5 core beliefs of Islam. Now, there are a couple of other ideas that are usually associated with Islam, and I'm going to put them over here. These aren't core beliefs, but they are important Islamic ideas as well. So the first one is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and that is jihad. Now, jihad means struggle. And the idea behind this is that it's not a physical struggle. It's not like conflict. It's more of a mental struggle to remain faithful. So, for instance, during Ramadan, you might get really hungry or thirsty. And it's that faithfulness, that struggle to remain faithful that you're fighting. You might really want to eat, and your stomach is saying, I want to eat, but your head is telling you, no, we have to remain faithful. That's what the struggle is. So jihad has kind of been twisted in recent years to mean like an actual violent physical struggle. And it's more of a mindset than it is an actual physical conflict. Another word that sometimes gets thrown around is Sharia. And Sharia is like Islamic law. And basically, this is like think of these more like community standards or community norms. Kind of like, how do we practice Islam? And a lot of these things are decided upon by the community. So it's not so much like a trial with a court and, a judge. A lot of this stuff is decided upon by the community itself. One more idea that's going to come up as we talk about Islam more and more is this word, the jizya. The jizya is a head tax, but what that means is it's a tax on non-Muslims living in Islamic territory. And basically what the jizya was a, think of it like a nudge towards converting. It's specifically forbidden to force someone to become a Muslim. Some Muslims will kind of ignore that rule, but mostly it's against the rules to force someone to become a Muslim. And so this jizya is a nudge to kind of get people to think about converting. Because if you convert, then you don't have to pay this tax. And so Muslims are pretty tolerant. They'll say, practice whatever religion you like. We're not going to tell you what religion to practice. But if you convert, then you don't have to pay this tax. And so that was usually a pretty convincing nudge for a lot of people, especially if everyone else in their community is a practicing Muslim too. So this is just a quick look at some of the basic beliefs of Islam. There's nothing in here that's really all that surprising or strange. It's pretty standard religious stuff. Okay, so moving on back to the story. So the year is now 632, and Muhammad has just died. So Muhammad died rather unexpectedly. From historical accounts, it sounds like medical historians, so historians that kind of look at medical records, have looked at accounts of Muhammad's final days, and it sounds like he might have died of meningitis. He had a really bad headache, he had a high fever, and he died rather unexpectedly. And the problem with this is he died unexpectedly, and so no one really understood his wishes after he died. He didn't write a will. It was unclear as to what he wanted to happen after he died because he died unexpectedly. So after some deliberation, it was decided that Muhammad would still lead religiously. He had provided everyone with the Quran, and a lot of his other sayings and actions were written down. So it was as if Muhammad was still leading them religiously. The problem is they needed a political leader because Muhammad was both. So they needed a political leader too, because Muhammad was both their religious leader and their political leader. So Muhammad is still leading through his example that was written down in the Quran and other books that kind of accounted what Muhammad said and did, so we could still read what his examples would tell us. But they needed a political leader. And so we get a new title, and this new title is Caliph. And Caliph kind of translates to deputy or assistant. So this is basically Muhammad's deputy, ruling in place of Muhammad. So the first caliph was a man named Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr was Muhammad's father-in-law and also one of Muhammad's closest friends. And so Abu Bakr fought a number of groups who had left the faith. So when Muhammad died, he fought a number of groups that had left, and he fought and brought them back. So a number of people decided that when Muhammad was gone, they were going to leave. Abu Bakr fought them and caused them to come back. The second and third caliphs we're not going to really worry about, but they kind of expanded Islamic territory. So they are taking territory away from the Byzantines. So remember, the Byzantines are the later Eastern Roman Empire. And the Sassanids, who are a resurrected Persian Empire. Now, the fourth caliph is a guy that we need to pay some attention to. The fourth caliph, his name was Ali. And Ali is a really important figure in Islamic history. So Ali was Muhammad's cousin, I believe his second cousin, and also his son-in-law. So he married one of Muhammad's daughters. Now, when Abu Bakr was named caliph, there was a debate. Should it be Abu Bakr or should it be Ali? Abu Bakr was maybe he was the older choice. He had more of a following. Ali was a much younger man, but what Ali had that Abu Bakr did was that he was actually a blood relation of Muhammad. He was related to Muhammad by blood. And so initially, the community's pick, the person that had the most community support, Abu Bakr, he won out and he became caliph. The supporters of Ali, they eventually got their guy with the fourth caliph. So he was Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. He helped Muhammad escape from his assassination attempt in Mecca. Now, Ali is assassinated in the year 661. And this is going to cause a rift in the Islamic community, because we're going to have this debate again. Who should be the next caliph? These first four guys all knew Muhammad. They knew how he acted. They knew what he wanted. And so they kind of guided Islam in his example. But now, after Ali's death, that debate resurfaces. Should the next caliph be a person with the community's support, who the community likes, or a person related to Muhammad. And what ends up happening is that it's the person that the community likes. And so from this point forward, after Ali's assassination, death, the Caliphate becomes hereditary. So a caliphate is like a kingdom. A kingdom is run by a king, an empire is run by an emperor, a caliphate is run by a caliph. The caliphate becomes hereditary, meaning that it is passed from father to son. Just like a kingdom might be passed from father to son, the caliph now becomes a hereditary title. And so just like Chinese dynasties, we get the names of some caliphates that are run by the same family. And so the first one, this first family that kind of takes over the caliphate, is called the Umayyad Caliphate. So the Umayyad Caliphate, which lasts from 661 to 750. Now, we know that there are some of these dynasties or kingdoms or empires that don't last very long. This one lasted less than a century, which usually is evidence that they're doing stuff that the people don't like. And that's what happens here with the Umayyad Caliphate. So let's talk a little bit about what the Umayyads do. For one, they move the capital away from Medina and they move it to Damascus, which was the Umayyads' hometown. Much the same way that Constantine moved the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium, where he was from. So the Umayyads are going to move the capital away from Medina, which is in the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, and they're going to move it to Damascus, which is kind of on the outskirts of the Arabian Peninsula. It is, however, closer to the trade routes. So it's closer to the Silk Road. But more importantly for this story, they're going to create a centralized government. And right there, that's a problem. But this government will favor Arabic Muslims over non-Arabic Muslims. And there's two problems with this. One, there's a long tradition in Islam that the community is consulted on decision making. But if we have a centralized government, that means that the caliph is kind of making these decisions by himself rather than getting the input from the community. So that's one reason we don't like what's going on here. And secondly, we can't favor Arabic Muslims over non-Arabic Muslims because Muhammad said all Muslims are equal. And so right there, we're disobeying what Muhammad said. So this causes a rebellion. So one of Ali's sons, his name was Hussein. So he was one of Ali's sons, led a rebellion against the Umayyads. So remember, Hussein is Ali's son, but he's also Muhammad's grandson. So this guy, Hussein, was the chosen guy of the people who wanted the caliph to be a person related to Muhammad. So Hussein leads a rebellion against the Umayyads, and it ultimately fails. And Hussein is killed by the caliph's government, which is a really bad idea considering that the caliph is supposed to be Muhammad's assistant, and they just killed Muhammad's grandson. So this just leads to more and more rebellions, which ultimately topple the Umayyad Caliphate. And we will pick the story back up there with the new Caliphate, which we'll talk more about tomorrow or in the next video, kind of outlining what that Caliphate does. But one last thing about this rebellion that Hussein led. This kind of solidifies this big debate, and it makes this debate now very violent. What was kind of a political debate, kind of a theoretical debate about who should be in charge, has now become very, very personal and very, very violent. And we still see this today because these guys, the ones who think the community should pick the leader, we call them Sunni Muslims. And the group that wanted the person related to Muhammad to be led are called Shia. And the fact that Hussein, who was the Shia's leader, is killed by the leader of the Sunnis means that these debates, which were political or theoretical, are now actually violent. And even today, when we look at conflicts within the Islamic world, a lot of these conflicts still go back to this divide within Islam. So if we look at even very modern conflicts, like conflicts between Iran and Iraq, or Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran is mostly Shia. Iraq or Saudi Arabia are mostly Sunni, or they were led by Sunnis. And so even today, we still see the echoes of that conflict still being seen. So we're going to stop there. In the next video, we'll talk about the next caliphate, and we'll talk about the economic and social and cultural characteristics of the caliphate. So until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.